Hello, everyone. We're grateful to have you join us today for another edition of your favorite language-based podcast, the Africa LSP Podcast. My name is Grace Hammoah Agyemang, and today's edition promises to be intriguing and interesting as always. So, if you are a social media enthusiast, especially an Instagram person, then this is a place to be. This episode is taking us all the way to Tanzania.
Welcome to Africa's LSP Podcast, where we explore the world of translation, interpretation, and localization, as well as connect with the language industry's top players. From language service providers to the businesses and individuals who rely on their services, we'll be delving into the challenges, opportunities, and trends shaping the industry. Join us as we discover the power of language and the impact it has on connecting Africa and the world. Brought to you by Bolingo Consult, Africa's LSP Podcast is the go-to podcast for all things language in Africa.
Well, when I mention Tanzania, I know the language that comes into your mind primarily will be Swahili. And in Swahili, we say karibu for welcome. So, karibu to you, my listeners, and then asante sana or nashukuru for thank you. So, karibu to you, nashukuru to you for joining us. Welcome. Well, this is not the first time we're talking about Swahili. In fact, we had an enriching conversation with Paul Warambo, a Swahili translator, in our previous seasons. So if you haven't listened to that, then please go back to Season 2, Episode 1 to listen to it. Let me make it easier for you. It was published on January 29, 2022. So go back there, listen to it, get that basic understanding of what the Swahili language is about, and then we can continue with this. Let's get right into today's conversation. My guest is a young, beautiful lady who is making exploits when it comes to the Kiswahili language. Her name is Carolyne, and Carolyne, you're welcome to Africa's LSP Podcast. We're honored to have you join us today.
Asante sana for giving me this platform to talk about my research. And well, yes, I have listened to a couple of Africa's LSP podcasts, but I was particularly drawn to the one that was talking about promoting the Khoikhoi language. And this particular podcast was interesting because the speaker talked about how promoting this indigenous African language could be a tool for preservation.
So, Carolyne, I don't want to place the horse before the cart, break the ice for my listeners and I. All we need to know about you, who you are, where you're from, what you're currently doing, what it takes to hang out with you, and all that you'd want my listeners and I to know about you.
A little bit about myself. I am originally from Kilimanjaro region in Tanzania, and I come from an ethnic group called Chaga, and my people speak Chaga language. Currently, I am a full-time master's student at the University of Mississippi, and I'm doing a master's in applied linguistics and TESOL. TESOL stands for Teaching English as a Second Language. I'm also an instructor for Swahili language here at the University of Mississippi. And interestingly, Swahili is the only African language taught here at the University of Mississippi.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to have an amazing conversation about language preference patterns among Instagram users in Tanzania. But before we dive deeper into that, Carolyne, can you paint a brief picture about the status of African languages on social media?
Interesting question, Grace. Well, the data from my study reveals that Swahili is significantly used on social media, particularly Instagram, that my study was conducted on. But unfortunately, other Tanzanian languages which fall in the category of community languages are noticeably absent in social media. So there is a small problem here, or maybe.
And can you tell us why you decided to conduct this research that explores language preference patterns among Instagram users in Tanzania?
The decision to conduct this study came from a point of view whereby I wanted to leverage my unproductive time online and make it research worthy. So, and I thought, again, what can I do with the time that I'm wasting online? And I was like, well, because I'm in the field of linguistics and it offers me avenues to research about language in different areas, including social media, then I was like, okay, I could use that. I could use that opportunity to look at language online, particularly to look at how do Tanzanians think before they make language decisions online. What are the things that they consider before they use Swahili or English online or other languages?
Well, so it's good to know that this research, which is going to be a document that helps people who are language enthusiasts, especially when it comes to Kiswahili, came about from, it wasn't planned. You were just there one day and you said that, well, instead of just being around on social media, let me use my time to do this research. I think that is a very good tip that my listeners and I will definitely make use of. Don't just be on social media. Make your time on social media very productive. We like that, Carolyne. Your research sheds light on factors influencing language choice. Can you share some specific examples of these factors and how they play out in real life Instagram posts?
Yeah, well, Grace, there are a few factors that influence language choices on social media. And the first one is the intended audience, or the audience that a social media user wants to address, especially the multilingual social media user. They think about which audience is this post intended to, and then they'll pick the language that is within their linguistic repertoire. Another factor is the content of social media posts. Again, as I was doing my research, and some of the participant responses were like, I will consider what kind of content I want to share online on social media, and I'll think about what language is more appropriate to use in. For example, participants in the study mentioned that they thought when they are posting about academic posts, English was more convenient language. But when they're posting about culture, Tanzanian culture, or hilarious posts or funny memes, Swahili was the appropriate language. Another factor that was mentioned was creating or maintaining a certain social media brand image. And one particular participant mentioned that it is important for him to have a Swahili ambassador brand on social media. So they're high likely to use Swahili as compared to English because they want to maintain the Swahili brand ambassador online. So those are the few factors based on the data from my study that influence language choices among social media users, especially the multilingual.
I think that I identify with the second point about the type of context or the content that you want to post on social media. I even do that a lot. When I want to post something about my culture or my people, I end up writing it in Twi. Well, so beyond Swahili and English, can you elaborate on the lesser known languages, community languages Tanzanian Instagram users incorporate and the reasons behind their usage?
Well, Grace, unfortunately, there was a noticeable disuse of community languages on Tanzanian Instagram, and maybe I could attribute that to because this social media platform do not feature these languages. If I post something in my tribal language or my ethnic language, it cannot be translated to English or it cannot be translated to another language. So I think maybe the disuse of these community languages on social media could be attributed to this platform failing to feature these languages.
And when you say community language, what exactly do you mean by community language?
The community languages are languages that are spoken by certain communities, and we can also call them tribal languages, or we can also call them ethnic languages. For example, in Tanzania, in the northern part of Tanzania, you can find community languages like Pare, that is spoken by Pare people. Chaga, as I said, I am coming from an ethnic group called Chaga, and Chaga people speak Chaga. There's also Maasai, another community language spoken in the northern part of Tanzania. But when you come to the southern part of Tanzania, you may find community languages such as Makua, community languages such as Makonde as well. But when you go to the central part of Tanzania, you'll find community languages spoken like Gogo and Nyaturu. While in the coastal region of Tanzania, you will find community languages such as Zarama, spoken by Zarama people, and Kwere, that is spoken by Kwere people.
So your study calls for making community languages more visible on social media. How can social media platforms themselves better support this multilingual environments? I think that some of these community languages are quite a number. Even in Tanzania alone, we can have a number. When you take it to other countries, how can this be possible? How can social media platforms themselves better support this multilingual environment?
Grace, that is a very great and practical question. And I think we need to advocate for these community languages to be featured on this platform. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, if I want to post something in my ethnic language, Chaga, it cannot be translated to other languages. So if we advocate or we lobby for our community languages to be featured in this online platform, or we work with this online platform like Facebook or Instagram and put content in our language so that our language could be present there, that means we could actually encourage people to use the community languages online.
And your research supports using social media posts for language instruction. Can you give some practical ideas on how educators can leverage Instagram for teaching Swahili or any other African language?
Grace, there are gazillion of ways you can make use of social media content in a language class. Actually, we can actually make an entire podcast about how you can use social media posts in a language class. So what can you use on social media and how can you use it as a language resource or a teaching or learning resource? You can use meme to teach culture of the target language. If you want to teach, if you are a Swahili instructor, you can use a meme to teach Swahili culture. As we all know that memes are very heavy in culture. You can also use reels, you can use videos, you can use audios as listening and response activity. You can assign your student to listen to a certain video on Instagram, on Facebook, and then you set questions and you ask them to respond to those questions, or they write an opinion paragraph based on the video they have watched online. Another thing that you can make use of as a teaching or learning resources on social media is the news posts. As you know, now a lot of news outlets, they normally have their social media accounts and they post news. So you can direct your student to a certain news outlet. For example, I teach Swahili. I can direct my student to BBC Swahili. And then I tell them to read a post. And then I tell them to respond on the post. Or I have questions based on that post and they respond to those questions. Or I tell them to write an informative paragraph based on that news post, or an opinion paragraph. What do they think about that news post? So there are lots of ways we can make use, as language educators, we can make use of social media posts as a learning or teaching resource.
Yes, Caroline, I definitely agree with you on these practical ways to ensure that we inculcate language into our posts on social media. Everybody is has almost switched to social media now. They get their source of information from the posts by the various media entities. And so if we toe the lane of trying to post in our own indigenous languages, I think it will be one of the ways we can kickstart that revolution to making sure that it's not only about language or the other person's language, but also the indigenous deliberate projection of the indigenous African language. And I couldn't have agreed with you better. Thank you for sharing those points with us. I know that my listeners are already incorporating that into their everyday life. We're almost at the end of this amazing episode, but tell me, what languages do you use on social media and how often you do that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, Grace. Well, I use both Swahili and English on social media, but sometimes I use Swanglish. So Swanglish is a mixed variety of Swahili and English. And I typically choose one of the languages that I speak to use on social media based on the audience that I want them to interact with my social media post. And sometimes I also do it as exclusion tactic. For example, if I'm posting something political happening in Tanzania and I don't want non-Swahili speakers to understand what I'm posting, I use Swahili. I know Swahili can be translated to English, but sometimes when I use Swahili slang words, they cannot be translated to English. So the information stays within my followers who speak Swahili. So sometimes I choose a language based on inclusion or exclusion tactic.
Well, I like the name Swanglish. I think maybe I'll try and incorporate that into, well, I speak a bit of Swahili. I know just 2 words. I know just 2 words in Swahili. I'm better off than somebody who doesn't know a word or 2. I mean, I know how to say thank you. I know how to say welcome. And I just need that to kickstart any conversation. So, yes. Thank you so much for joining us, Carolyne. If listeners want to read more about this amazing study, where can they find it? Where is it published?
My research is not yet published, but I am planning to do so. During the summer, I'm planning to work on researching on journals that would be best for my work to be.
And what final message do you have for our listeners? We'll appreciate if you say that in Swahili so that all the Swahili lovers and fans will identify with the language. Yeah.
My final message is tutumie lugha zetu za Kiafrika kuposti na kukomenti Facebook, Instagram na Snapchat.
Okay. Carolyne, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It's been great talking to you. We've learned a lot. I mean, if I didn't hear anything, I know that when people want to post about culture, when people want to post about their everyday life, they rather choose the Swahili language, which a lot of people can identify with, instead of using the other person's language or the English language. I also know that Kiswahili has now become an everyday language, and there are a lot of basic, simple ways we can incorporate that into our everyday life to project the language as well as other African languages. We are looking forward to when the research is finally published so that we can all get a grab of it, dig into it, and learn a thing or 2. Thank you so much for joining us once again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Like we say in Swahili, nashukuru. Yes, nashukuru. I know I got it right. Nashukuru is actually thank you in Swahili. The basic one is asante sana. But if you want to let people know that, yes, you know the Swahili language, then you say nashukuru. I know you're saying that after me, nashukuru. Okay, people, thank you so much. That's how we wrap up on today's edition of your favorite language-based podcast, the Africa LSP Podcast. My name is Grace Hammoah Agyemang. It's been nice having you for this conversation. Don't forget to log on to the podcast again. And like I said earlier, we had a conversation on Kiswahili on the first episode of the 2nd season. And so don't miss out on that. Go and check that out. It was published on January 29, 2022. You can go and listen to it. My colleague had a conversation with Paul Warambo, and it was an enriching conversation about the Kiswahili language. He is a Kiswahili translator, and he gave us all the juice and spice that we need when it comes to Kiswahili. So log on to that, listen to it, and then also add this conversation we've had with Carolyne. And I mean, you have the whole dish or the whole menu. Thank you again. And until we come your way next time, bye-bye and see you.
Thanks for tuning in to Africa's LSP Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. For feedback or enquiries, reach out to us at podcast@bolingoconsult.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite platforms. Until next time, stay curious and keep growing.